Have you ever felt that burning sensation in your chest when you see your partner talking to someone else? That invisible fire that spreads through your veins like poison, whispering lies about betrayal that hasn't even happened. What if I told you that this feeling, this destructive force you've been calling love, is actually God's alarm system screaming at you about something far more dangerous than you ever imagined? There's a shadow lurking in the corners of your relationship, feeding on your insecurities, growing stronger with every jealous thought, every possessive glance, every moment you choose suspicion over trust. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't just about your emotions anymore. The ancient scriptures speak of a spiritual war being fought not with swords and shields, but through the very emotions that course through your heart every single day. Jealousy and covetousness aren't just feelings, they're doorways, invisible cracks in your soul where darkness seeps in and begins to reshape everything you thought you knew about love. Right now, as you're watching this, there are signs all around you, subtle whispers from the divine trying to warn you that you're standing at the edge of a cliff, one jealous thought away from destroying not just your relationship, but your very connection to the light that once guided you. Can you feel it? That restless energy that makes you check their phone, question their every move, demand explanations for conversations that mean nothing. But what if everything you've been taught about protecting your relationship is actually the very thing that's killing it? What if the voice in your head telling you to guard, to control, to possess, isn't your intuition at all, but something much darker masquerading as wisdom? The signs are there, written in the language of your own behavior, encrypted in the patterns of your thoughts, hidden in the very moments when you feel most justified in your jealousy. Every time you choose suspicion over faith, every time you let covetousness poison your perception, you're not protecting love, you're feeding the very force that will ultimately consume it. There's a reason why certain relationships feel cursed, why some couples seem trapped in endless cycles of mistrust and accusation, why love that once felt pure becomes contaminated with doubt. The enemy of your soul knows exactly where to strike, and jealousy is his favorite weapon, because it disguises itself as care, as protection, as love itself. But God has given you warning signs, spiritual alerts, that most people ignore because they're too busy defending their right to be jealous. These aren't just random coincidences or personality flaws, they're divine interventions, urgent messages from above trying to save you from a spiritual trap that's been set specifically for you. If you're ready to discover the hidden signals that have been trying to reach you, to understand the spiritual warfare happening in your relationship, then subscribe to this channel right now, because what you're about to learn will change not just how you love, but how you recognize the voice of God speaking through the very challenges that are breaking your heart. The first whisper comes disguised as protection, doesn't it? You tell yourself you're just being careful, just paying attention, just making sure everything is okay. But deep in your chest, there's a knot that tightens every time they smile at someone else, every time they take a little too long to respond to your message, every time they mention a name you don't recognize. This isn't love speaking, this is something else entirely, something that masquerades as care while slowly poisoning the very foundation of trust that real love requires. The scripture tells us that perfect love casts out fear. But what happens when fear begins to cast out love instead? You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when you catch yourself scrolling through their social media, looking for clues, for evidence, for proof of something you can't even name. Your heart races not with excitement, but with a sick anticipation of finding something wrong, something that will justify the anxiety that's been eating you alive. This is the first sign, when love becomes investigation, when partnership becomes surveillance, when the person you're supposed to trust becomes the person you're most suspicious of. God is speaking to you through that very discomfort, through the way your spirit recoils from the person you're becoming. But here's where it gets dangerous, because jealousy is a shapeshifter, and it knows exactly how to make itself look reasonable. It whispers logical arguments in your ear, presents evidence that seems undeniable, makes you feel like you're the only one who sees what's really happening. It tells you that your suspicions are wisdom, that your possessiveness is passion, that your need to control is just love expressing itself honestly. And slowly, without you even noticing, it begins to rewrite your story. turning every innocent interaction into a potential betrayal, every moment of their independence into a personal attack. The enemy knows that if he can convince you that jealousy is justified, he can turn you into the very thing that destroys what you're trying to protect. He understands that a jealous heart is a heart that has forgotten how to receive love, how to trust in the goodness of others, how to rest in the security that comes from knowing you are chosen, beloved, and enough exactly as you are. When you feel that familiar burn of jealousy rising in your chest, you're not feeling love. You're feeling the absence of it, the void where confidence and trust should be. The most terrifying part is how natural it feels, how easily you can convince yourself that this is just how love works, that everyone feels this way, that a little jealousy is healthy and normal. But God's voice is in the very discomfort you feel when you act on those jealous impulses, in the way your spirit feels heavy after you've interrogated your partner about their day, in the hollow victory you feel when you've successfully controlled another moment of their life. That unease isn't guilt. It's your soul recognizing that you've stepped out of alignment with the love you were created to give and receive. The second wave comes when you start rewriting history, when your mind becomes a detective constantly gathering evidence for a crime that exists only in your imagination. You begin to remember conversations differently, to assign sinister meanings to innocent glances, to turn their kindness toward others into betrayal toward you. This is where the spiritual battle intensifies, because now you're not just fighting jealousy, you're fighting against reality itself, against the truth that love requires space to breathe, room to exist without suffocation. When Proverbs warns us that jealousy is cruel as the grave, it's speaking about this very moment when your perception becomes your prison. You've been here before, haven't you? Standing in front of the mirror, rehearsing conversations that haven't happened yet, planning confrontations about situations that exist only in your mind. Your heart pounds as you imagine scenarios where they've chosen someone else, where they've been lying to you, where everything you've built together crumbles because of something you haven't even confirmed. This isn't intuition, this is torment, and it's designed to make you feel like you're going crazy, like you can't trust your own judgment, like the only way to feel safe is to control everything around you. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to understand. Every moment you spend lost in jealous fantasies is a moment stolen from the love that's actually available to you right now, while you're busy investigating shadows and prosecuting crimes that haven't been committed. Real intimacy is withering away, starved of the attention and presence that could be nurturing it instead. God is trying to show you that the very thing you're afraid of losing is being destroyed not by external threats, but by the internal war you're waging against peace itself. The covetousness creeps in so subtly you don't even notice it happening. You start comparing your relationship to others, measuring your partner's affection against the attention you see other people receiving, feeling robbed of something that was never yours to begin with. You watch other couples and feel that sick twist of envy, not because you want their specific relationship, but because you want the security, the ease, the apparent lack of drama that you imagine they possess. This is the trap, thinking that love is a limited resource, that someone else's happiness diminishes your own, that you have to fight for what should flow freely. Social media becomes your battlefield, doesn't it? Every post they like, every comment they make, every tagged photo becomes evidence in the case you're building against them. You screenshot conversations, analyze the timing of their responses, create elaborate theories about what their online behavior really means. You become a forensic investigator of your own relationship, dissecting every digital interaction like it holds the key to some hidden truth. But God is speaking to you through the exhaustion you feel after these marathon sessions of surveillance, through the way your body feels depleted after hours of looking for problems that don't exist, through the emptiness that follows every discovery that proves, once again, that your fears were unfounded. The third layer reveals itself when you realize you've become someone you don't recognize, someone who weaponizes love instead of offering it freely. Your words become sharp instruments designed to cut and control. Your questions become interrogations. Your presence becomes a weight that suffocates rather than comforts. You hear yourself saying things that sound like your voice but feel like someone else's poison, accusing them of betrayals that live only in your imagination. demanding explanations for crimes they haven't committed. This is when God's warning becomes impossible to ignore, because you can see the light leaving their eyes. Watch the love you're desperately trying to protect begin to wither under the heat of your suspicion. The most devastating part is how convincing your own arguments become, how logical your jealousy sounds when you're the only one listening. You build elaborate cases in your mind, connecting dots that don't exist, creating patterns from chaos, turning their natural human behavior into evidence of deception. Late at night, you lie awake rehearsing conversations, planning confrontations, gathering ammunition for wars that will only wound the very person you claim to love. Your heart races with the sick satisfaction of having figured it out, of having uncovered the truth that you're certain they're hiding from you. But here's the cruel irony. The more you try to hold on to them, the more they slip away. Every jealous outburst creates a little more distance. Every possessive demand builds another wall between you. Every moment of covetousness steals another piece of the trust that once held you together. You can feel them pulling away, and instead of recognizing this as the natural consequence of your behavior, you interpret it as confirmation of your worst fears. The enemy has you trapped in a cycle where your jealousy creates the very rejection you're afraid of, where your attempts to prevent loss actually manufacture it. The spiritual warfare intensifies when you start praying for signs, asking God to reveal their hidden sins, begging for confirmation that your suspicions are justified. You twist scripture to support your surveillance, use prayer as a weapon rather than a source of peace. Turn your relationship with the divine into a conspiracy theory where God is helping you catch your partner in lies. This is when you know you've crossed a line, when your faith becomes a tool for control rather than a source of love. When you're asking God to participate in the destruction of the very covenant He blessed, friends and family begin to notice the change in you, don't they? They see how you've become obsessed with details that don't matter, how you've turned every conversation into an opportunity to gather intelligence, how you've lost the ability to simply be present without constantly analyzing, evaluating, and judging. They watch you disappear into your own paranoia, becoming a shadow of the person they once knew, and their concern becomes another source of irritation, because they don't understand what you're going through, but God is speaking through their worry, through their attempts to reach you, through the mirror of their faces when they look at who you've become. The fourth dimension opens when you begin to realize that your jealousy has become an addiction, a drug that simultaneously tortures and thrills you, leaving you craving the very pain that's destroying your peace. You find yourself creating scenarios just to feel the rush of jealousy, manufacturing reasons to be suspicious, picking fights just to experience the toxic high of righteous anger. Your body becomes dependent on the adrenaline of conflict, the cortisol of constant vigilance, the twisted satisfaction of feeling wronged. This is when God's alarm becomes deafening, because you're no longer fighting for love. You're fighting for the right to remain in spiritual bondage. The covetousness evolves into something more sinister when you start wanting to possess not just their body, but their thoughts, their dreams, their very soul. You resent their independence, their friendships, their ability to experience joy without you, their capacity to exist as a complete person rather than just an extension of your needs. You begin to see their autonomy as betrayal, their happiness without you as evidence of your inadequacy, their refusal to be consumed by your jealousy as proof that they don't love you enough. The enemy has convinced you that true love means total possession, that if they truly cared, they would gladly surrender their identity to ease your insecurity. But here's where the spiritual battle reaches its climax, when you realize that you're not just hurting them, you're systematically destroying yourself. Every jealous thought carves another groove in your neural pathways, making it easier to choose suspicion over trust, fear over faith, control over love. You're literally rewiring your brain to expect betrayal, to look for problems, to find fault in everything beautiful. Your capacity for joy diminishes as your tolerance for paranoia increases, and you find yourself unable to receive love even when it's offered freely, because you've trained yourself to see deception in every gesture of affection. The most heartbreaking moment comes when you catch a glimpse of yourself through their eyes, when you see how your jealousy has transformed you into the very person you once promised you'd never become. You watch the light dim in their face, When you enter the room, feel them choosing their words carefully to avoid triggering your suspicion. Notice how they've learned to hide their natural joy to protect your fragile ego. This is God's most urgent warning. When the person you love begins to shrink themselves to accommodate your brokenness, when your need for control becomes their cage, when your fear of abandonment creates the very distance you're trying to prevent, the enemy's final strategy is to convince you that this is just how love works, that everyone feels this way, that jealousy is natural and healthy and normal. He whispers that your partner should understand, that they should change their behavior to accommodate your fears, that your insecurity is their responsibility to fix. But deep in your spirit, you know this isn't true. You can feel the weight of knowing that you've become the storm in your own life, the chaos in your own peace, the enemy of your own happiness. God is calling you back to yourself, back to the person you were before jealousy became your master, back to the love that exists beyond the need to control and possess. The fifth revelation cuts deepest when you finally understand that your jealousy has become a false god, demanding constant sacrifice, endless offerings of peace, joy, and trust laid upon its altar. You've been worshiping at the shrine of your own insecurity, bowing down to the idol of control, serving a master that promises security but delivers only chaos. Every time you choose suspicion over faith, every moment you prioritize fear over love, you're offering incense to a deity that feeds on your destruction. 1 John tells us that perfect love casts out fear, but you've created a religion where fear casts out love, where anxiety becomes your daily prayer, where jealousy becomes your twisted form of devotion. The spiritual warfare reaches its crescendo when you realize that you've been fighting the wrong battle entirely. All this time, you thought you were protecting your relationship from external threats, but the real enemy was never out there. It was the voice inside your head convincing you that love is something you have to earn, keep, and defend through vigilance and control. You've been shadow boxing with phantoms while the real destroyer worked silently within, convincing you that peace is naive, that trust is dangerous, that love without jealousy isn't love at all. God has been trying to show you that the very thing you're afraid of losing can only be preserved through the courage to hold it with open hands. But here's the truth that will either liberate or terrify you. Your partner has never been yours to possess. They are a gift, a blessing, a choice that must be made freely every single day. And the moment you try to cage a gift, it stops being a gift and becomes a burden. The covetousness that whispers mine, mine, mine is the same spirit that convinced Eve that she needed more than what God had already provided. The same lie that told Cain that his brother's blessing diminished his own worth. You've been trying to find security in ownership when the only real security comes from knowing that you are loved not because you've earned it, but because you exist. The most profound moment comes when you finally see your jealousy for what it truly is: not love, but the absence of it; not protection, but destruction; not wisdom, but foolishness dressed up in the costume of care. You realize that every jealous thought has been a vote of no confidence in the God who brought you together. Every possessive act has been a declaration that his love isn't enough to sustain what he has. Blessed, you've been trying to do God's job, to control outcomes that were never yours to control, to secure a future that can only be surrendered to the one who holds all things together. The enemy's greatest victory isn't when he destroys your relationship, it's when he convinces you that you must destroy it yourself to save it. He knows that jealousy is a slow poison, that covetousness is a cancer that eats love from the inside out, that the very thing you're using to protect what you have will ultimately be the thing that drives it away. But God's voice is in the exhaustion you feel from fighting battles that don't exist, in the emptiness that follows every jealous victory, in the way your spirit recoils from the person you've become. He's calling you back to the simple truth that love is not a prize to be won, or a territory to be defended, but a grace to be received and a gift to be given freely. The sixth and final awakening comes when you stand at the crossroads between destruction and redemption, holding in your hands the power to either continue feeding the monster of jealousy or to starve it. Through the radical act of surrender, this is the moment when God's voice becomes crystal clear, not in the thunder of accusation, but in the whisper of invitation, calling you back to the person you were created to be before jealousy rewrote your story, you realize that every warning sign, every spiritual alert, every uncomfortable moment of recognition has been leading you to this place of choice, where you must decide whether to remain enslaved to the fear of loss or to step into the freedom of unconditional love. The transformation begins not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with the simple acknowledgement that you have been living in a prison of your own making, that the bars you've been gripping so tightly are the very things keeping you from the love you desperately seek. You start to understand that jealousy isn't just an emotion, it's a spiritual stronghold, a fortress of lies that has convinced you that control equals love, that possession equals security, that fear equals wisdom. But God is offering you the key to your own freedom, the courage to love without guarantees, to trust without proof, to open your hands and release what was never yours to hold. The healing doesn't happen overnight, but in the quiet moments when you choose faith over fear, when you respond to their kindness with gratitude instead of suspicion, when you celebrate their joy instead of questioning its source, you begin to remember who you were before jealousy became your identity, before covetousness became your compass, before control became your religion. The person you once were, open, trusting, capable of receiving love without interrogating it, is still there, buried beneath layers of hurt and fear, waiting to be resurrected by the power of divine grace. You start to see your partner not as a possession to be guarded, but as a miracle to be celebrated, not as a threat to be managed, but as a gift to be cherished. The very things that once triggered your jealousy begin to become sources of joy. Their laughter with friends, their success at work, their ability to bring light into rooms you've never entered. You realize that their happiness doesn't diminish yours, that their love for others doesn't reduce their love for you, that their fullness as a human being is not a threat to your relationship, but the very foundation upon which real love is built. The most beautiful part of this awakening is when you finally understand that God's warnings about jealousy and covetousness were never condemnations. They were invitations to something infinitely better. Every uncomfortable moment of recognition, every spiritual alert, every divine intervention was leading you toward the radical freedom of loving without conditions, trusting without guarantees, and finding security not in your ability to control outcomes, but in the unchanging love of the one who created you for connection, designed you for intimacy, and called you to be a vessel of grace rather than a monument to fear. This is where real love begins, not in the desperate grip of jealousy, but in the open palm of surrender, not in the anxiety of possession, but in the peace of partnership, not in the fear of loss, but in the faith that what God has joined together, no earthly force can tear apart. The choice is yours, and it's available to you right now. In this moment, in this breath, will you continue to serve the God of jealousy, or will you step into the freedom of divine love?